welcome to another edition of Artsbeat Radio and TV here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and we're going to have Summer Sounds of Symphony this year as the Hartford Symphony Orchestra has its 25th anniversary season of the Talcott Mountain Music Festival just across the state line in Simsbury, Connecticut. Now, many of you may remember the Springfield Symphony Summer Pops at Stanley Park in Westfield, which started sometime in the early 1980s and kind of lasted until around 1999-2000. But Hartford Symphony took on that summer program of bringing live classical music and pops outdoors in the summer. So 25 years later, the Talcott Mountain Music Festival is a staple here. If you've never been, it's just across the state line and well worth your time. We've got a couple of people from Hartford Symphony. This is the first time that members of the Hartford Symphony Orchestra have joined us on Artsbeat. I'm really glad to welcome them. Colette Hall and Adam Boyles from Talcott Mountain Music Festival. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
So you're just about to launch the 25th season with a 4th of July concert, which has become a tradition down there. How did the Talcott Mountain Summer Music Festival come to be?
It was really, I think, the brainchild of excited volunteers and musicians within the symphony those 25 years ago who knew that there was a need and excitement about having a summer festival. We didn't start out at the Simsbury Meadows, but we're in a couple of other locations in the Simsbury and Avon area to start. And then it just has grown so much over time. And like you said, Mark, has really become a staple of the summer festival season in our area.
And I actually have never been. So do you have a permanent stage there, or is it a temporary stage that comes up and down for the summer? And how do you get all those musicians out there and on stage?
So it's a permanent stage at the Simsbury Meadows Performing Arts Center. It's a wonderful facility that's run in part by the town of Simsbury. And for the musicians, they're a little easier to travel than a stage. So we kind of just say, hey, it's time to go out to Simsbury. That's been our summer home for 25 years now. So they're very familiar with that area, and they meet us out there at the permanent structure.
And is it possible for you to do shows? Could you do more than just a summer season? Could it be a year-round situation, or is it really just a warm weather facility?
It's really just a warm weather facility. There's really only covering over the stage area itself. So we definitely need those warm weather months, especially for the orchestra and for very valuable instruments that need to have certain conditions as well.
And I just remember from the days of the Springfield Symphony at Stanley Park, you have to have a lot of faith in the weather gods and all of that. Do you have an inside scoop on what the weather's going to be on any particular day, or do you just keep your fingers crossed?
No, what I'm planning to do is to just not wash my car at all. Therefore, the rain won't come the next day. So it worked a couple of years ago. I believe we went in 2019, 2019, excuse me, the last time we had our full summer series. I don't believe we had one rain out at all. So we got very lucky last time, and we're hoping the same for this year.
So the season kicks off on July 2nd, I believe, with a 4th of July and Independence.
July 3rd?
July 3rd.
July 2nd.
July 2nd with
July
a rain
brochure
date
has
to the 3rd.
Right. Rain date's the 3rd, right.
But
yeah.
It's your typical patriotic American songs. It's a program that you've done before that people talk about with fireworks as a finale.
Yes, that's correct. So we have traditional patriotic favorites like the Stars and Stripes Forever, the Armed Forces Salute, the American Salute, 1812 Overture. So they're kind of familiar staples each season. And then we also try to feature other American artists and American works on the program. So this year we'll also have a tribute to Louis Armstrong, the famous trumpeter and singer, a tribute to Elvis Presley, and also a medley of Richard Rodgers' Broadway tunes as well. So that's always been a wonderful patriotic, but also American-facing program.
And that kicks it off. Why don't you go through the lineup of shows? Because each one is kind of unique, and it's a real pops experience.
It sure is. So I'll jump in on the after Celebrate America, which again is July 2nd. All of the concerts are on Fridays at 7:30 at the Simsbury Meadows Performing Arts Center. Our second program on July 9th is Queens of Soul. That will be conducted along with Celebrate America by our music director, Carolyn Kwan. The Queens of Soul program is going to feature 3 amazing vocalists who are going to be singing hits from amazing pop divas such as Aretha Franklin, Tina Turner, Patti LaBelle, Gladys Knight, Nina Simone, Whitney Houston, Jennifer Hudson, Adele, and many more. So it's going to be a fabulous program. And this is brought to our orchestra by the same company that worked with us on our Motown program in the 2019 season, which I think many of our patrons will remember fondly. And then for our third program, Adam is going to take over the conducting reins, and he can tell you a little bit more about that next program.
Sure, and this is on July 16th. This is the Classical Mystery Tour, a tribute to the Beatles. This was also a group that came a few years ago and performed the entirety of the Sgt. Pepper album on one act, and then had selected Beatles highlights in Act 2. In this iteration, it's going to be featuring the Abbey Road album, mostly in the first act, and then again a smattering of other Beatles tunes from Sgt. Pepper, from the White Album, from earlier Hard Day's Night, earlier albums and such. It's all over the place. So if you love Beatles, you're going to love this. They do such a great job. They have costumes that look like they do a couple of different costume changes, so they look like the Beatles from different eras. They sound great. They play great. It's an absolute hoot. So bring your dancing shoes for that one, as well as the one after. This is July 23rd, the Disco Inferno Show. This is a group called Classical Night Fever, and I had the opportunity to work with them a couple of summers ago. It's all your favorite disco hits. You have ABBA, you have Gloria Gaynor, and all sorts of other, anything from the disco era you could possibly want, Village People. It's a great show, and they are an absolute hoot. They're a bunch of characters. They have very wild costumes. They have great audience interaction. It's going to be another one where there's going to be a lot of dancing for sure. It should be great fun. And our last one of the season on July 30, this is Super Diamond performing the music of Neil Diamond. And this is a show that some of us have been wanting to get here for quite a while, to feature the music of Neil Diamond. Hits like Forever in Blue Jeans, America, Sweet Caroline, and I can wear my Red Sox hat for that one. Song Sung Blue and I'm a Believer, among others. It should be an absolute great show. And when the weather is great and it's a clear sky and you're bringing food and people are singing and dancing, I can't think of a better way to spend a summer evening.
I can't either. There's nothing like hearing good symphonic music, a large group of players under the stars and stuff. And while we're talking about this, if folks are interested in ordering tickets or getting more information, go to the Hartford Symphony website at hartfordsymphony.org. I've got a question. You're playing music of the Beatles, for example, which was a quartet of musicians. Who orchestrates this music for a symphony to perform it?
There are various arrangers that are given the task. It's not one set person in this particular show. Sometimes it is. But in this one, it was various people that thought, well, if I have the band on top of it, what can the symphony orchestra add or amplify to the music that's going on? There were a lot of Beatles tunes that did have orchestra backing, for example, especially later on. Not just the one Sgt. Pepper hit near the end, the one rip near the end. But there are other things that have a symphonic nature about it, big broad numbers, in particular, the longer numbers later on. So it's really just a matter of amplifying and extending what's already there.
Yeah. What is it like for the musicians? I mean, generally an orchestra performs classical music and you switch gears completely to pops. Do the musicians like it? Are they more relaxed when they perform pops, or is it not make a difference whether it's classical or pops? It's on their music stand.
Well, I think maybe Colette should comment on this, also being an instrumentalist herself. Colette?
I would say that our musicians are just immaculate professionals, and it really doesn't matter what's on the stand for them. They're going to take the most care with that music. I would say it's not necessarily a more relaxed atmosphere, because some of these orchestral parts, especially in pop music, can actually be deceptively difficult for the orchestra to play. Sometimes there are tricky licks or things that are hard to coordinate with the band. So they do a great job of making it sound easy. So that's a great thing. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's more relaxed. It's just a different type of music. So you get that different type of feeling, and the orchestra really taps into that. They know how to portray that really well.
Yeah.
And often you'll also catch them singing along.
Yes.
Which is also great. Obviously not the wind players, but the string players and percussion players will be singing along up there on stage and having a great time too.
I would assume that performing outdoors has its special things. I mean, I've seen some outdoor theater. A couple of years ago, there was a production at the Berkshire Theater Group of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and a bat had flown in and had settled on an actor's shoulder during a rather tense, dramatic scene, and they actually had to stop the show. Are you competing with wildlife, flies, birds, and all kinds of stuff when you're performing outdoors?
Yes, but I wouldn't say it's the Amazon. Yes, there are. You deal a little bit with mosquitoes, you deal a little bit with flies, but I, at least in the time that I've been involved with the Hartford Symphony out at Talcott, which is since 2016, never had a bat to deal with. There are other live theater situations I've dealt with elsewhere where we've had dogs walk across the stage. That actually hasn't happened. The stage is quite raised, so it's a little trickier for our four-legged friends to get up there.
Another question that people had, you're doing a particular program. How long does it take for the orchestra to rehearse to do that specific show that you're going to do on any given evening in terms of Talcott Mountain?
Go ahead.
So go ahead, Adam.
No, go ahead, please.
I was going to say the orchestra, so they get their music normally about 4 weeks in advance so they can start practicing on their own. And then we have just one rehearsal for each of these programs. So they rehearse same day as the concert in the afternoon. They have a 3-hour rehearsal, and then they're ready to go. And again, it just speaks to their professionalism and their dedication to their craft.
And are these a set of performances the first ones that the orchestra has done as a full ensemble since the pandemic started? Or have there been, did you have a Talcott Mountain last summer?
We did not have the Talcott Mountain Festival last summer. We were just still too deep in COVID to really feel comfortable to assemble the orchestra or to have an audience of any size out at Simsbury. So this is our first live performance with a group of this size. We did have one other recorded program that we did with our orchestra, the same size orchestra. And that was our gala this season. We recorded at the Bushnell and then included that in a virtual program for our gala attendees, which was really a fun project to do and was so rewarding after not being on the stage for over a year. So we're really, really looking forward to being live and connecting with our audiences again. And I know our musicians, Adam, Carolyn, we all have missed having live audiences so much. It's such a different feeling. It's such a different energy, and being able to connect with people is just so rewarding compared to some of the recorded programs that we've done on our own.
Yeah. How did you both spend the pandemic? I mean, I know that the orchestra suspended performing. How did you all do and get through it in terms of being artists who are so used to working together on stage in front of an audience?
Well, my other position is as director of orchestras at MIT. So having also a foot in the academic world, I still had a position of sorts. We took all of our teaching online, found ways to do various orchestra projects and recording and video recordings, audio recordings with the orchestra while we were distant. We were actually able to reconvene at the beginning of March and do some projects live with the chamber orchestra. So I've been able to do a little bit back on the podium, but being with Hartford at Talcott will be the first large ensemble situation I've had since the last Hartford Symphony Orchestra Masterworks concerts that I did with them in February of 2020.
Yeah. What about you, Colette?
Well, being in the administration for the Hartford Symphony, I was actually very much involved in the video productions that we put out over the pandemic. So while we couldn't assemble the full orchestra for anything because of the large groups, restrictions on having large gatherings, but also needing to have adequate distancing for things indoors, we shifted away from full orchestra performances and did a number of small chamber performances, which we recorded and then made available as on-demand programming for our subscribers and audience members. So surprisingly enough, for me personally, I stayed pretty busy this past year in producing and editing those programs, which featured different sizes of ensembles like a string quartet, brass quintet, wind quintet. We had programming, chamber programming that was directed by our concert master, Leonard Segal, who actually runs our in-person chamber series, the Sunday Serenades at the Wadsworth Athenaeum in Hartford. So there was a lot to do with that programming, especially with wanting to make sure that we were doing it as safely as possible for all of the musicians and crew members who were involved in the production. And then we also produced an online series with our music director, Carolyn Kwan. And that program was called Masterworks in Depth. And it took a look at the programming that we were going to do in the past season, and invited guest artists and showed different video clips, musical examples. And it kind of served as like a pre-concert lecture, but in an expanded format, so that people could still engage with the orchestra, still be hearing live music and learning about it and getting them excited for our programming that's coming up in the fall.
Yeah. Do you have to take any specific precautions for Talcott Mountain this summer? I know that the summer theater season has just ramped up, and Actors Equity requires the audience to be masked when they go. They don't sell tickets at the door. And in some cases, the theaters require people to sign a waiver. What kind of precautions will be in place for Talcott Mountain?
So we've discussed this at length, and with the lifting of restrictions in the state of Connecticut and just sort of how things are continuing to move progressively in a positive direction for us here in the state. We are following the state and CDC recommendations. So for an outdoor performance, we are allowing patrons to come in unmasked for that. We have limited the capacity for the venue to allow people to socially distance if they wish to do so. But it'll be optional for patrons who are vaccinated and strongly recommended for patrons who are unvaccinated at this point. We did also eliminate our Grass Pass tickets this year. So in the past, we've offered those, and you could buy a package of tickets and just show up to any of the concerts. You could use all 10 at one concert or spread them out however you wanted. But this year, all of the concerts all of the tickets are concert specific, so that we do have a heightened contact tracing ability. We also we would sometimes sell tickets at Fitzgerald's Foods, which is a local grocery store in Simsbury, but we're not offering that this year either because there's not adequate contact tracing through that method. So we did make a few adjustments for our patrons who are attending. For the orchestra, while there isn't a national directive in the same way that there has been for Actors Equity for the Musicians Union, the American Federation of Musicians, or for our local IATSE crew members. We are still having some additional precautions on stage for the musicians and crew. So they'll continue to wear masks if they're able to do so. Obviously, if you're playing a trumpet, you can't really do that. But we'll have additional distancing on the stage, and all of the crew and staff who are working backstage will be masked, and we're collecting vaccination information, but also requiring PCR testing for anyone who is unvaccinated to help make sure all of our wonderful performers, crew members, staff members stay safe backstage.
That's great. We're going to take a very quick break here to acknowledge the underwriters that make Artsbeat programming possible here on Westville Community Programming Channel 15 at 89.5 FM WSKB. When we return, we'll be chatting more with Hartford Symphony, Talcott Mountain Music Festival's Colette Hall and Adam Boyles. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. I'm Mark Auerbach. We'll return after a couple of announcements.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Bay State Dental. Comprehensive dentistry at 14 convenient locations in Springfield, Chicopee, Longmeadow, West Springfield, Belchertown, East Longmeadow, Ludlow, Northampton, Greenfield, and Wilbraham, as well as 29 Broad Street in Westfield. Bay State Dental makes it a priority to help you achieve and maintain the healthy smile you deserve. On the web at baystatedental.com.
Listen to me, Michael Buster McMahon, Mondays 8 to 10 a.m. to learn the stories behind your favorite songs. Or don't. I'm not the boss of you.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. And this morning, for the first half of Artsbeat, we're going south of the border to Simsbury and the Talcott Mountain Music Festival, which is the brainchild of the Hartford Symphony Orchestra. And Talcott Mountain Music Festival is celebrating its 25th year this year in Simsbury, Connecticut. With us, Assistant Associate Conductor Adam Boyles and Colette Hall from the management team at Hartford Symphony, the people that put Talcott Mountain Music Festival together. How far in advance do you all plan the particular concerts and the artists that you're going to bring on board?
We start that process pretty early while we are getting ready to actually produce our concerts on stage this season. We'll start planning for the 2022 season probably in September of this year. So it takes normally about a full year for us to get all of those details together.
And in terms of the Hartford Symphony itself, you've already announced the Masterwork series for the Bushnell for the fall, winter, and spring. Will there be a pop series up and coming at the Bushnell as well?
We are planning for Pop's concerts this year. We're changing things a bit in that we're not offering a subscription series this year. It will be announced as individual concerts rather than as a subscription package. So that will be coming along shortly as well. But we are planning for some concerts, some Pop's concerts at the Bushnell as well in the fall.
Yeah, and when was the last time the orchestra actually performed at the Bushnell?
February of 2020.
February 2020. Yeah. So I guess it'll
performed. I should say performed live because they did do some recordings for the gala not that long ago. That was also in the Bushnell, but in front of an audience, in front of a live audience, February 2020.
So I bet everybody's just dying to get back together again.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I know for theater people, some of the theater folks that I talked with, some of them found other things to do during the pandemic, though it was very tough for them. But I know that the musicians had it really rough because many musicians not only perform with orchestras, but they do side gigs either in clubs or in weddings and all kinds of things that all got postponed and canceled. What was it like for the musicians of the Hartford Symphony and yourselves not having these opportunities during the pandemic?
It just felt like you had an arm amputated, because so much of what you do and so much of your livelihood just evaporated immediately. And many colleagues also teach. They teach private lessons or they teach in academia. And so a lot of the academic jobs stayed, but those that teach privately had to move it to Zoom or make other accommodations, which are not as desirable as giving lessons in person. Some perfected hobbies. We have bread makers, we have woodsmiths in the orchestra that perfected their hobbies over the break, and some of them even monetized it a little bit. So you do what you can, and some of it's coming back now. It's funny you should mention weddings, because those string quartet gigs, those singing gigs are starting to come back. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about music, I mean, certainly you can turn on, you can put a record or a CD or a tape or whatever into something and listen to music, but there's nothing like live music, and the pandemic really shut it down on so many different levels.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
I can't wait to hear a live concert again, and specifically an orchestra one where you have 50 to 75 musicians, because you can't recreate that on TV.
No, and I have to say, out at Talcott, the sound is actually really wonderful. They do a marvelous job with the speakers. You can hear everywhere you are in the park, and it sounds just great. And, food and music are both better al fresco. So what can I say?
Yeah, I'll agree. We've only got a minute or two left, so run down the Talcott Mountain lineup again for people so they can order tickets.
Yes, so I'll start off by saying you can order your tickets online at hartfordsymphony.org 24 hours a day, or by calling our box office at 860-987-5900. And we'll be happy to assist you with the tickets. The first of our concerts is going to be our traditional patriotic Celebrate America. That's Friday, July 2nd. Our second concert will be Queens of Soul, featuring wonderful hits by divas of soul and R&B. That will be Friday, July 9th. On July 16th, we have Classical Mystery Tour, a tribute to the Beatles, featuring Adam as our conductor, and then also Classical Mystery Tour, which is a just amazing cover band for the Beatles, and featuring music from the Abbey Road album specifically, along with other great Beatles hits. On Friday, July 23rd, we'll have Disco Inferno featuring Classical Night Fever, really just rolling out the hits of the 70s with hits like Get Down Tonight, Oh What a Night, Dancing Queen, Disco Inferno, and many more. And then we will close the season on Friday, July 30th, with Super Diamond performing the music of Neil Diamond with songs like Forever in Blue Jeans, America, Sweet Caroline, Song Sung Blue, and I'm a Believer.
That sounds like a great season. We have to hope the weather gods are looking out. I understand that the predictions are that it will be no humidity and between 70 and 80 degrees each of those evenings, correct?
Every evening.
Yes, we love that prediction. Us amateur meteorologists here at the HSO love that prediction, Mark. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. We've been chatting with Colette Hall, who's the operations manager for the Hartford Symphony Orchestra, and Adam Boyles, the assistant conductor. All best of luck with this summer's Talcott Mountain Music Festival. For those of you who haven't been, it's just across the border in Simsbury, Connecticut. And again, you can get all of the information on the upcoming concert season at Talcott Mountain at hartfordsymphony.org. Thanks for joining us. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to acknowledge our underwriters, and we'll be back with more Artsbeat, so don't go away.
Underwriting is brought to you by Boise Cascade Distribution, providing products and services needed for building material dealers, home improvement centers, and industrial customers. They offer everything from engineered wood and plywood to Drex decking and railing, James Hardie siding, and Advantech subfloor. Located at 33 Fowler Street Extension in Westfield and on the web at bc.com. They are committed to providing quality products, great service, convenience, and value.
Underwriting for Community Radio on WSKB is brought to you in part by Rockies. Over 30 convenient locations throughout Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Florida. One of the nation's largest ACE dealers. Expertise and great product selection in paint, hardware, lawn and garden. That's Rockies. Rock solid service since 1926. On the web at rockies.com.
Join me, Tina Gorman, each week from 6 to 8 a.m. for Wake Up Wednesday, when my guests and I discuss health, wellness, and lifestyle reimagined.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. If you missed a part of today's program or you want to catch any of the other Artsbeats that we've done over the last weeks and months, you'll find them all archived on YouTube at WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. I'm really excited today for our next guest is Isadora Wolfe, who is at Berkshire Theater Group, getting ready to open The Importance of Being Earnest, where she's working on movement for that. I saw her perform over the holidays in Holiday Memories outdoors behind the Unicorn Theater in really balmy 20-degree weather. Isadora, I don't know how you did that for a couple of weeks with snow and ice and high winds every day. That was a theatrical challenge.
I think it was easier for us than the audience, actually. We were able to move around. I had lots of quick changes. So but the audience sitting and watching, I felt a strong, I fell in love with each audience member for being there.
For me, it was a real treat. I mean, I had missed, being locked up with the pandemic and everything. I had missed going to live theater. And when I told people, well, I actually went to a live theater show and I sat outside at the Unicorn Theater. If the artistic director and CEO had not put a Berkshire Theater Group black woolen cap on my head that I walked around in all winters, my souvenir, people would have thought I was lying.
Yes. I think everyone I know that came ended up with one of those hats.
So Isadora, you're doing the movement for The Importance of Being Earnest. Can you explain? I know you're a dancer and a teacher, and during the pandemic, you did a whole bunch of classes online for Berkshire Theater Group. But can you explain what doing the movement for a non-musical play involves?
Well, it's different for every production that I do. And I mostly work with quote unquote straight plays, with non-musical productions. And so pre-opening, opening as in reopening the world, not as in opening the show. We were not sure for Holiday Memories, which you saw. I was also the movement director for that show. And as you saw, we had to find really creative ways of creating intimacy and creating moments together when we, the cast, had to be 6 to 10 feet apart, depending on what we were doing. So I had to choreograph those fights that happened distanced. So that was just a challenge and a really fun one to kind of abstract storylines that needed intimacy and needed actual touch. So we, as the world is, the terrain keeps changing. I had worked with David Auburn, the director of The Importance of Being Earnest, on Skin of Our Teeth a couple of years ago. And that had a lot of different moments of movement in it. And for this one, he knew that he wanted a scene. I'm not going to give it away, but a scene of movement. And then we were just waiting to see how I was going to need to be involved in terms of the distancing and not. And I ended up, of course, not needing to be because restrictions have been lifted. So my job, besides choreographing this surprise moment, which I hope you get to see, my job also became about doing brief warm-ups with the company to start to familiarize people with themselves in a space and other people again, because that aspect of being close to other people and touching other people, using our voice, projecting, we have not done that as human beings in quite some time. And I think it's underestimated the impact that has, especially on a performing artist. So it's an interesting challenge. It just keeps shifting.
Now, you were trained as a dancer in ballet or contemporary or a combination of both?
I started out probably like a lot of kids do. I basically like restaged all of Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation in my home when I was a kid. So I really got into hip hop without classes and studios, but that's where my love for dance began. And then I was put into ballet classes and ended up training seriously at Boston Ballet. I moved out to Boston when I was 15. And then I switched over. I took a year off and did a lot of African dance again, which of course that's where hip hop has its roots. And then I started studying contemporary. And later in my 20s, which is, that's later on in one's dance career, found found my way into the dance theater scene. And that's, it's a combination of how I grew up, really, because I grew up around the theater. So that's where I live. That's like my happy place, is that right at that peak between dance and theater, and physical theater, dance theater, immersive theater, however you want to kind of phrase it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, as a dancer, your movements, or a choreographer, your movements are to music. And here you are doing movement for a play. So how do you find the choreography in the words of a play?
Well, in this particular play, it is actually there is a moment that's to music, but usually I don't choreograph to music. Usually I start out, perhaps I'll improvise in the studio with music as inspiration, and I'll create, with a lot of time, I'll create playlists for myself. That's sort of my research time. So that when I go into the studio, I kind of use those certain songs that I've been thinking about, imagining, daydreaming, and I'll see what happens in my body to recreate movements that I liked from filming, which is a very arduous process. And then generally from that time on, I work in silence to really look at the movement. So that's like how I would say, like, what my personal choreographic process is. But most of the time in my career these days, I enjoy, and I am working with other directors or even other choreographers as a movement coach, or what they call a rehearsal director in the dance world. And so I'm sort of the medium between their fantasies, what they say they want to happen, and the actors or dancers, the performing artists, embodying them, and how we can make that that image, that sort of dream, come to life. And it's a lot of technical work to try to get that ephemeral moment to appear.
Did you know anything about the play, the importance of being earnest, before you got involved in it?
No, I knew from being an artist. I knew about Oscar Wilde, like sort of like a general, in a general sense, or knowledge of him as a playwright. And of course, then I read it, and I'm always so surprised at how, because I read it, but if I really need to see things and hear things out loud. And so the moment that I started to hear it out loud, I realized how incredibly funny that play is. And it's more difficult for me because of my background, I think, to see that the language doesn't necessarily do the same pop out. I don't work from scripts usually. So as soon as I saw it on that stage, just in its work in that first few days of rehearsal, I realized it's like one of the funniest pieces of theater ever.
Yeah, it really is a comedy classic.
Yeah.
When you approach the play, do you obviously you'd have to tailor a lot of the movement that you're directing to the capabilities of the actors. Do you find that actors that you're working with have a natural sense of movement, unlike dancers who it's part of them. Do you have to work? Is it more difficult working with an actor than it is a dancer?
It's only difficult if I'm really time pressured. And that for me is the thing that's the most, I think, harmful to a process with movement. But if one has time, every single actor has a physicality in them and a movement capability in them that is interesting and unique to them. And there are definitely certain actors, in the show, actually, in The Importance of Being Earnest, the lead, Jack, is an actor that I worked with for a good amount of time in another production. And I happened to know, and it was a dance theater production, very, very, very physical. And so I happened to know his capabilities and was able to really, and so I had like this confidence, yes, working with him, and knew what he could do. And of course, and he's quite pliable and nimble that way. But it's really interesting to see people that say, I can't dance, actors that say they can't dance, to look at where their physicality is. Perhaps it's just a matter sometimes of some strengthening and conditioning and looking what habits are. Other times it's looking deeper at their character and trying to carve out their physical character more and emphasize that more and support more. But it's the same thing as with dancers that say they can't act. There has to be the baseline. There has to be a comfort level and a confidence that needs to be nurtured first. Otherwise, if there's not that trust in their body, it's very, very challenging and they're not enjoying it. And at the end of the day, dance and movement should always be it should be experienced with some joy in the body, even if it's, on the darker side. So yeah, it's a challenge, but one that's very fruitful, I'd say, to work with actors.
Now, so at Berkshire Theater Group this year, you're getting the gamut from winter outdoors to summer indoors, because The Importance of Being Earnest originally was going to be done outside, but now it's going to be inside the Unicorn Theater.
Mm-hmm.
What other projects are you going to be working on this year besides The Importance of Being Earnest?
At Berkshire Theater Group?
No, and just in general.
Well, at BTG, I'll be doing the choreography for The Wizard of Oz, which I'm excited and anxious about. And I'll be getting back together, having a reunion with Gray Simons, who I got to be in shows with and got to choreograph for before. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm anxious about it because it's with, younger actors and performers, and that's new for me. And then after that, I have to keep the lid on it a bit, but I'll be remounting one of the productions that had to close in New York City due to COVID. So I'm super excited about it, but I also have to keep the lid on it. And we're just right now trying to get all the pieces back together. And then we'll be looking at what we need to change in a post-pandemic, hopefully post-pandemic world. And I'd say in the past year, it's not just the pandemic. It's also, I believe, that all of us have looked really hard at the agency of one's body, at the need for artists and every person to express their needs fully and to feel safe. So it's my hope that as everyone starts to re-enter, especially in the city, in the Broadway and off-Broadway scenes, that we start to engage in conversations and possibly change content based on the feeling, the safety of the performer, and in every way, not just COVID.
Yeah. I know that there are certain Actors Equity has put a group of rules out there, not only for actors and audience and everything like that. As a dancer and in movement, how do you think these restrictions, until they're lifted, will change the way you approach the work that you're doing? Because you really have to be more concerned now with other people than we did before the pandemic started.
Yeah. You know, it's right now, it's really changing at this moment. It's just changing the content of what's produced in a lot of settings with distancing. It's simply, there are just like huge amounts of options that are not available. If you're not able, it depends on the setting. But if the setting is such where there's distancing, then you're looking at form, you're looking at the material itself, the movement itself, you're looking at patterns and space. And then if you happen to be in a pod, or those restrictions are lifted, then it's starting to get back into partnering and touch. But that it is, I have to say, putting your hands, I don't know if you've experienced this, just shaking people's hands as stuff has started to reopen, or giving people hugs. But just that feels kind of wild that we're doing that now, just as people. So then to go into studios and to, pre-pandemic, incredible amount of contact with other people. That's what the work is a lot of times in contemporary dance. So I think it's going to take a while to get back there. And I also do think it's going to be nuanced conversations with each artist, I hope, so that they feel safe.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
Switching gears here to another question. You've chosen to do a part of your career in Western Massachusetts, which has become, the creative economy has brought a lot of artists here to work and to live. And you live here part of the time. You grew up here part of the time. What draws you as an artist to the Berkshires?
I think as an artist, nature, space, I think those two commodities are scarce in city life. And I think it's, there's been times where I've worked when I was abroad working for a choreographer in Germany, I was in a relatively small town. I also didn't speak the language or know anybody. So my life there was, all of us that were in the company was pretty isolated. And I thought it was kind of remarkable because everyone was from everywhere that was in this company. And it was pretty remarkable what would happen in the studio, because that's where we lived and expressed. That was the space where we did that, the literal geographic space. And I find now that I do that again. Like even if I don't have to teach a class, even if I don't have a rehearsal, I'll go to the studio and be in the space of the studio, because I can do that here. And you cannot just go into a studio in New York City, and a big studio, and have quiet and time and be able to let your creative process be what it is in that moment. I mean, that is kind of huge in terms of a process, to be able to have that literal and figurative space. And then in terms of nature, I think it's important for us all to remember that we're part of something a little bit bigger. And as a performer, it's what the performer anxieties, especially, that can come in, and every decision can feel so make or break in your career. It can be really maddening and hard in the city. And so, because you can just get in that race and just spiral. And I do find comfort in the city among, being able to get on the train and be around everyone else that's trying to get to their jobs too. And that's the same sense that I have when I'm here walking in the woods with my dog, and feeling like, okay, I'm part of something bigger. And I think that that's important for artists.
Do you feel that the Berkshires is your creative home now versus New York, or do you balance the two?
I'm not sure. I'm trying to balance the two. I also have children, 2 of them, and they're both one's 5 and one's 2. So it is like a literal juggle, and I'm trying to find a way to straddle both. it's been a little bit easier because my jobs teaching have been virtual. So I've felt I've been able to keep jobs where I'm teaching to the students that are in the city, and I've been here. But now as things reopen, and I really do miss a lot of things about the city, I'm hopeful I can somehow find a way and carve a new path for myself where I'm able to be here and be there and be a good mom, which is a tall order.
It's a very tall order. When did you make the transition? I know you were a performer and probably still perform, and you teach. When did you get into the idea of becoming a movement director and coach for plays? Was that something that's relatively recent, or have you been doing this all along?
No, I've been doing it off and on at Berkshire Theater Group for a while, but in a broader sense, when I think it was 2013, at the very beginning of 2013, I became a rehearsal director, which is it's kind of a movement director. It's someone that sort of takes care of the piece in the dance world, of the show, the immersive show called Sleep No More in New York City. And so I was rehearsal director there, and there's a small team of us. And by the time I left last year, and over 10 years was able to go away and come back to that show, I was the resident director there. So I think at that time we had 65 cast members and a rehearsal directing team of anywhere from 3 to 6 people at a time. So I managed sort of keeping the artistic integrity of the show and being the liaison with the choreographer and the Punch Drunk team. They're the creators of that show. So that's where I got a whole bunch of really intense experience in that role. And from there, doing that, of course, I just became more comfortable in that role. And when I got to do various productions, I would be the movement captain or rehearsal director, or I would go and guest at different institutions or festivals.
Yeah. Another question: when you're doing when you're choreographing for dance or performing in dance, once the show opens, you have to keep rehearsing it and brushing it up and all of that. When you're doing a play, like The Importance of Being Earnest, and the play will open, do you go back and brush up the movement, or do you just trust the intuition of the people involved?
You just trust the intuition. I mean, that's how it goes, and you really give it over. If you do, a lot of times in productions, I've been the movement captain or the dance captain if I'm in it. And then you would do brush ups, like a flight call or a dance call or a fight call, depending on what the choreography was in the show. You would do that before curtain, say at half hour. You'd run through those bits. And so in those moments, if I was able to be in that role, then I could give people notes. But as choreographer, movement director, you're not in the cast, then no, unless there's a huge issue, it's all theirs to figure out.
Yeah. Now you're moving on to The Wizard of Oz. What musical version is The Wizard of Oz? Is it the music that we all know from the movie? So you're there'll be dances for Munchkins, dances for Glinda, and all of that. Have you ever seen or choreographed a production of The Wizard of Oz before for the stage?
No, I have not. And I started looking at some movement. I started with my research. I was looking at, I don't know if you're familiar with the shuffle, but it's a kind of a craze if you start to go down that rabbit hole online. And it was reminding me a lot of some Native American dance that I had studied. And so then I started finding these Native American dances that they created during the last pandemic to try to get rid of Spanish flu, to try to get rid of the flu, I kind of went, and this will happen a lot, is that I'll sort of go down those pathways and just keep watching stuff and it'll soak in. So once I get studio time, I have all of that information in my head, and then the music, and try to kind of create an amalgam so that it's interesting to take influences from all different places and put them into, especially to put them into a canon that we know so well. Everybody knows Wizard of Oz. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find someone that doesn't know it. So, and Gray, who I've gotten to work with a lot, is just so much fun and so fantastical and really open. So I'm hoping that now that restrictions have been lifted for that production, I think we'll be having a lot of fun finding some new ways to look at the movement.
And it is a universal story that's been adapted so many times. I mean, it was a movie. It's been adapted for the stage. It became the musical The Wiz. It then became Wicked and the prequel and all that. So if I can't imagine anybody who doesn't know the story, but they probably should go see it live anyway.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And to see young performing artists just, I mean, it's just in the auditions, I found myself getting a little verklempt a few times. To see kids on stage singing and acting again and expressing themselves it's pretty incredible. So I'm just on that level. I think that's what motivated me the most, was that aspect of getting. Usually that's not my thing, but I thought this year these kids are just going to be so hungry and ready. And it's, you know, when you look at it from that perspective, you can think, okay, it's a new world, and let's go with that. Really, that dream, even that pipe dream stance of it being a new world and creating theater from that perspective.
Isadora Wolfe, movement director for The Importance of Being Earnest at Berkshire Theater Group, and soon to be choreographing The Wizard of Oz, and that's at the Colonial, correct? So information on both of these and all the other programming that's come back to the Berkshire Theater Group is available at their website, berkshiretheatergroup.org. Berkshire Theater Group performs at the Colonial Theater in Pittsfield, at the Fitzpatrick Main Stage, and the Unicorn Theater in Stockbridge, and they were one of the two theaters in Western Massachusetts that was able to remain open during the pandemic, and they're up and running again. Isadora, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you so very much. I hope to see you soon.
Hope to see you soon, too. That wraps up another edition of Artsbeat TV and radio here on Westfield Community Programming, Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. If you missed a part of today's program or you want to catch it again, it's stored on YouTube on WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer today. We've been broadcasting from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy. We'll see you next Friday at 8 o'clock. Thanks for joining us.
This is the life. Here's where the living is. This is the life. Baby, I'm there. This is the life. You've waited long enough. Man, you've arrived. Breathe in that air, wine and perfume, silver and candlelight. Children make way. I'm here to stay. Come join the club. Hear that sweet music start. This is the life, sweetheart. Tell them bye-bye. Get where the action is. Come have some fun. I'll lead the way. This is the life. They've kept you in a box. Break down the wall. Come out and play. See all the lights. They're spelling Norm Lewis. Ha ha! How sweet the song when you belong. That's how it's gotta be. This is the life you'll see. I can be what I wanna be. I can dance like I wanna dance. I can sing like I wanna sing. I can live like I wanna live. This is the life. This is the life. This is my life. This is the life. It's where the living is. This is the life. Baby, I'm there. This is the life. I've waited long enough. This is the life. Breathe in that air. See all the lights. They're spelling North Louis out of my way. I'm here to stay. King of the hill. That's how it's gotta be. This is the life. This is the life. This is the life.